Well, it's tough to replicate greatness. Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of my Scream franchise review series where I review every Scream movie leading up to the new one, which comes out on Friday. Then I review that and then do a ranking of all 5 movies. So this is Scream 2, which came out in 1997, a year after the first one. Very quick turnaround. The first one had so much success that they greenlit a second one before the first one was even out of theaters. They started shooting like 6 months after the first one came out, and then the second one came out less than a year after the first. Very quick turnaround, and that's what happens when movies make that much money. They try to pump out sequels to make more money. I'm not saying that this is just a cash grab, but I'm just saying that's what tends to happen. And guys, this is going to be a full spoiler review where I dive in deep into every specific thing that happens. So if you haven't seen this movie, I would suggest watching it before you watch this. If you don't really care, I guess that's your prerogative. Go ahead and watch, but I would suggest watching it first and then coming back to watch this review. And normally what I do with my spoiler-filled reviews is I go a little bit more in-depth. It's more casual, kind of more just me talking. I don't edit as much. I'll certainly put clips in once in a while, but I don't edit around stuff as much unless I make a really, really big mistake. But for the most part, it's going to be all one take, just me going through the movie, my thoughts on specific things throughout the course of the movie that I feel like should be talked about. And I typically, it's not as structured as I do with my spoiler-free reviews where I go with my positives, negatives, and then the score. A little bit longer, a little bit more in-depth, a little more specific. So kind of like I did with my Scream 1 review, although it's not going to be as long as that, I promise. I don't think there's going to be nearly as many specific things to talk about for this one. So without further ado, let's get into my Scream 2 review. And right off the bat, this movie has a great opening scene. It's not on par as the first one, but nothing's ever going to be. I mean, that opening scene was phenomenal. This one was still very good. It was also very different from the first one. It doesn't involve phone calls or anything like that. Instead, it involves this couple played by Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps, who did a great job, who are at the movie theater to see a showing of Stab, which is kind of a movie rendition of the events that took place in the first Scream movie. And it's kind of like, this is in very poor taste what they're doing within this movie, because not the makers of this movie, but what they did within this universe is that they're trying to make money off of a real tragedy. Now, there are certainly ways to make movies about real tragedies, but the way they did it here was in very, very poor taste, and it was a cash grab, and they were trying to get entertainment value out of it and just make a bunch of money. And especially based on the way people were acting at the movie theater and stuff like that, certainly was not a very moral or ethical thing to do, but they did it because it's going to make them money, and it's a tragic thing that happened in the real world, and people are making light of it, basically. They're acting like it's this fun... They're acting like people would for a fictional horror franchise. Like, say, we're going to a Scream movie or Nightmare on Elm Street movie, something fictional, but these things actually happened. These people are watching it like it's this enjoyable, fun thing. And I've always thought it was strange, but it also was brilliant for them to do that, because it's a perfect depiction of what would happen if something like that happened. Of course they're going to try to make money off it. So that made perfect sense. And then the couple in general, I enjoyed them quite a bit. Jada Pinkett and Omar Epps did a very good job in their roles. I think we certainly get a lot more time with them than expected. I don't know if it's about the same length as the opening scene of Scream 1. Probably similar, maybe slightly longer, I feel like. And just, you know that something's going to happen, but you don't know exactly when, you don't know exactly how, and you get the scene with Omar Epps in the bathroom where he puts his ear up to the stall door, and then he gets stabbed through the door, which is a pretty cool kill, if I'm being honest. And then Jada Pinkett ends up getting killed in the theater when the guy makes her think that he's Omar Epps and goes in the theater with a mask on and his jacket and everything. And then just the scene with her dying, standing up there in front of the screen and all these people seeing her and kind of slowly realizing what's going on. You see, I think one guy's reaction is like, oh shit, this is real. And then the rest of the crowd start to realize what's going on as she's dying up there. It was a very well shot, very intense, very disturbing scene. So I really dug the opening scene. It's certainly not as good as the first Scream, but definitely want to talk about it a little bit because it was very good. All 4 of these Scream movies have great opening scenes, and this is no exception. And then from then on, we see Sydney again. She's got a roommate. She's in college. Randy's in college, and we kind of get introduced to this new group. I mean, we get returning people. Like I said, Randy, Sydney. We get Sydney's roommate, Hallie, who's new, and then Dewey and Gale are back, but they're not together, which I thought they would be. But they kind of end up sort of getting together again in this one. Kind of a will they, won't they kind of thing. And then we also get this new guy named Mickey, who ends up being one of the killers. I mean, I was going to get into spoilers, so. And then we get this girl played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, who's Cece, and she dies early in the movie, which I thought that was a very good scene. That was kind of this movie's version of the Drew Barrymore scene, except a lot shorter. She gets the call from Ghostface, tells him to fuck off, and then he goes in and kills her. And that's, I think, the first, well, no, not the first kill of the movie, aside from the first 2. And we also get this scene, which I thought was interesting early on, talking, Randy and Sydney were talking, and Sydney's like, this is happening again. It's the same thing. And Randy's kind of denying, no, it has nothing to do with it. Obviously, he was wrong, but he was kind of in denial at this point. I don't love the characterization of Randy in this movie. It seems like they kind of changed him a little bit from the first one. He made him a little bit dumber, because in the first movie, he was right about literally everything. In this one, he's wrong about quite a bit, especially even the fact that he got the quote wrong about aliens, which I read the trivia about that. Apparently, the other guy was supposed to say it wrong, and he was supposed to say it right, but since the other guy said it right, the actor Jamie Kennedy said it wrong, and then they just left it in, he ad-libbed it. I thought that was strange. I feel like they should have just redid that, because within the context of the movie, that doesn't make any sense. There's no way that Randy would get that quote wrong. Anyway, continuing with that, I love the discussion they have in this movie about sequels and how Randy basically says that sequels are by definition inferior movies, and then Mickey is kind of talking to him and he's like, what about this? What about that? He says Terminator 2 is mentioned, and which I actually disagree with. Aliens is mentioned, which I do agree with. And then Empire Strikes Back was mentioned, which I definitely agree with. Although Randy kind of cops out of that one. He's like, oh, it's part of a trilogy. It was always planned. I don't know about that. It was kind of always planned. Not exactly, but it's still a sequel. That doesn't take away from the fact that it's a sequel. I don't know why I'm getting into the semantics of it. That's just an exchange and kind of an ongoing thing throughout the movie that I really enjoyed, them talking about sequels that are better than the original. And it was also very meta. It's funny because this movie is definitely not as good as the original. So it's almost like they know that, and they're saying that within the movie. Like, sequels, by definition, are not going to be as good. I think they knew nothing's ever going to be as good as the first Scream. So it almost seems like they acknowledge that within the movie, which I enjoyed. Again, the meta stuff is back again. Randy is definitely at the heart of that. You have the conversation with him and Dewey where they're talking about potential suspects, and I love the part where where Dewey's like, so you're a suspect then. Randy's like, if I'm a suspect, then you're a suspect. Okay, let's just both move on. I thought that was pretty funny. Like, obviously we know neither one of them are the killer. They know neither one of them are the killer. But it was just a funny little exchange. And then just sticking with Randy, I'm not necessarily going in order as much as I did with my Scream 1 review, because I remember that one specifically a lot more than I remember the specifics of this one, even though I just watched it last night. But Randy dies in this movie, and I still feel pretty weird about that. I don't love how he went out, and I don't love the fact that he died in this movie. I feel like this is a character, because of his inherent nature, is someone that should probably continue on throughout the franchise. I really, really miss Randy. And who knows, maybe they'll find a way to bring back him in Scream 5. I hope they don't, because they showed his dead body, so that would be pretty dumb. But I hated the way he went out. First of all, why is he standing so close to that damn van when nobody else is? That was a very weird thing. And they're like, oh, where could they possibly be? Where could they hide? There's a fucking van right there. Where do you think? It's like, come on, guys. And then he stands right next to it and gets pulled in. That was annoying. But every scene with Randy in this movie was great, even though I think they kind of character assassinated him just a little bit. Not that bad, but it seemed like they made him a little dumber and a little, like, seriously standing next to the van and being wrong about the aliens quote and being wrong about this being related. It's like in the first movie, he knew everything. In this one, he basically knew nothing. That bugged me a little bit, both the characterization and the fact that he died. So I'm done talking about Randy. But aside from that, the movie, I'd say overall, the reason I don't like it as much as the first one, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, it's not paced nearly as well. It drags in points, and the first one never lets up. And then the party scene is like the whole second half of the movie, and that whole sequence is great. There are points in Scream 2 where it's dragging, and I kind of found myself feeling, okay, can we get moving here? Like, it didn't need to be 2 hours long. It certainly could have been more like an hour 45 or something. There's definitely a few scenes in there that weren't super necessary. Oh, I do have to mention, though, one scene that I particularly did like is the play scene where Ghostface shows up and Sidney's in this play, which is, by the way, a very, very creepy play. Like, why the hell is she doing this, considering everything that's happened to her and all the trauma she's gone through? Horrible idea. And then she sees Ghostface there. Now, I'm pretty sure that was actually Ghostface, right? That was not in her imagination, or maybe it was. I'd like to hear your guys' interpretations, but I think Ghostface was really there, and it was just tough for people to see what was going on besides her. But I'm not 100% sure about that. It certainly could have been her imagination. That scene was very intense, and it was a little bit tough to watch because of the way it's shot, but when I was watching it, I was definitely on the edge of my seat, even though I've seen it several times, and I obviously knew what's going to happen. But the way that scene was shot, and the vibe and everything in the score, and the play that was going on made it extra scary, because the play's like one of the creepiest plays I've ever seen in real life or a movie. Like, can you do any? Can it be possibly any creepier? Like, that was crazy that they are doing that, and the fact that she's involved in it, given everything that happened, very bizarre. It was a horrible idea for her to be in it, and I don't like that the teacher convinced her to do it too. But a very well done scene, and it perfectly shows all the shit she's gone through and her mental state. And then aside from that, I'm going to just kind of talk about her relationship with Derek, who, this one was interesting because I certainly think Derek is a much better guy than Billy, and at least that's the way the movie was depicting him for the most part. But it showed signs of him maybe being kind of weird too, being kind of creepy too. Like the part where I'm trying to remember, there's a part, I think, where she says she wants her space and he kind of doesn't let her. I'm not sure. I think that was somewhere early on in the movie. Later in the movie, he ends up giving her space, which was nice, but certainly gave off a little bit of creepy vibes, not nearly as bad as Billy. But the thing with this is, and this is why this franchise is so brilliant, and this is a great part about this movie, is you're thinking, okay, so she's got a new boyfriend. He's not like Billy, but he certainly has a little bit of Billy in him. And you're like, okay, there's no way in hell they're going to do the boyfriend again, right? There's no way they do that. And you're not so sure. You're like, wait a minute, okay, but we thought in the first one there's no way it was going to be Billy. So maybe they will do the boyfriend again, because they know that we don't think they'll do it again. But then you're like, wait a minute, maybe they will, because maybe they actually won't, because we think that, and now we're overthinking everything.
I know you. You know you. And I know you know that I know you.
It's like, damn, these movies are so good at keeping us guessing. Although I don't think this one does nearly as good of a job as the first one. I don't think there's as many potential suspects, but we'll get to that when the reveals happen. And then one of the killers, I don't think was really earned either. And we'll get to that when we get to the killer reveals. But I think the Derek thing was very well done. And then the fact that he got slashed in the arm by Ghostface and didn't kill him was something that made us very suspicious, along with Sidney and the other characters. Like, wait a minute, how the hell you got slashed in the arm and then he just ran away and didn't kill you? It's like, it's almost like you're trying to hide the fact that you're Ghostface, but you get yourself hurt, so we don't think you are. Like, that seemed very odd. So we're meant to feel suspicious of him, and Sidney does as well. And then I think the idea of that, I think what they're saying is that Ghostface did that on purpose to make Sidney feel suspicious of Derek. I think that's what they're saying, but I'm not 100% sure. That certainly makes the most sense. Otherwise, they would have just killed him right there. I think this whole thing was to fuck with their head. So that was very well done, that whole sequence, and everything they did with Derek, and I'll touch a little bit more on him later. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is, I talked about Randy. Dewey is paralyzed now, or I'm not sure about paralyzed, but he's got like a limp, and that was caused by getting stabbed in the back. It was nerve damage, and they called out in the movie, and Randy's like, how'd that happen? Oh, nerve damage. Okay, yeah, that seems to make sense. There was another specific aspect of the movie that I wanted to talk about, but for whatever reason, I can't necessarily think of it right now, because I said that I don't have any notes down. I was just going to do this off the cuff and just be myself. I knew there's another issue I had aside from the pacing. Not the killer reveals. I talked about that too. Weren't quite as good. And then I talked about the Derek plot line. Hallie, I think, is... We don't get much characterization for her. I don't really have a ton to say about her. I liked her. She was cool. And then... the scene with her and Sydney in the car where where Ghostface is knocked out and they're trying to get past him because they can't get out the back doors because of child lock, and they can't get out the front door because it's backed up against something. So they have to crawl over Ghostface and then open the driver door and get out that way. Now, it's a very intense scene, one of the most intense scenes in the movie, definitely similar to the car scene in the first movie where Ghostface has the keys, but even more so. Very, very intense. Now, one issue I had with this, though, is why did they not take his mask off or kill him? I mean, there's got to be a weapon somewhere that you can kill him, right? Ghostface is knocked out and you're just going to walk away. And then Sydney decides after they're walking away, no, I got to find out who it is. Damn it. It's like, I understand, but why the hell would you not do that in the first place? Figure out who this person is, or kill them, or do both. It's like, how... I guess maybe they'd probably get prosecuted if they killed someone who was knocked out. But either way, still, take the mask off and see who it is. That was kind of lazy writing to me. It feels like they cheated a little bit with that. Then she was about to take the mask off and bump the car horn. It's like, okay, but you can still do it, though. And then she decides to do it after they're about to leave. That annoyed me and actually ended up getting Hallie killed. So that did piss me off a little bit. That's one thing that bugged me, a specific thing that bugged me about the movie. Certainly, there wasn't really anything like that bugged me this bad in the first one. A bunch of little things. I think this one certainly has more little things and a few more big things, so that's why I didn't like it as much. But aside from that, so I talked about Cece, I talked about Hallie, I talked about Sydney and Derek. There's a little bit more I wanted to talk about with Derek. Mickey, I enjoy Mickey, and he ends up being one of the killers. I think he's a pretty fun character. I mean, Timothy Olyphant is a great actor, and he's certainly going to give it his all. I enjoyed the hell out of him. The other killer, on the other hand, which I'll get to, not as much. I didn't really care for that person as much, and that didn't feel quite as earned. But, so... Oh, this is another thing I wanted to mention. Guys, you're getting the real me here with no editing unless something really, really bad happens. Joel, Gale's cameraman, I enjoyed him. He was a ton of fun, and certainly might have been the most rational person throughout this entire movie. He's like, nah, man, with all this shit going on, I'm out of here. And he ends up coming back by the end. Which, I guess, all this was over, Ghostface was dead, so it makes sense that he'd come back. But I enjoy him, and it certainly... It was refreshing to see someone in a horror movie who decided to leave. He's like, nah, with all this going on, I'm out of here. I don't want to be involved in this. That's something that a lot of other horror franchises won't do. So it was nice to see that. Aside from that, I talked about in the first one how much I loved all the characters and the acting. Acting was great again. The group of friends, group of characters, I don't think is quite as good. They're not quite as well fleshed out as they were in the first one. I think they did a good job with Mickey, but in the first movie, both killers, Stu and Billy, were extremely well fleshed out. So when we got the reveals, it really hit hard. So I guess I'm trying... Man, I thought I had a little bit more to talk about throughout this movie, but for some reason I can't necessarily think of it. Oh, this is what I meant to talk about. Cotton Weary. We get a lot more Cotton Weary in this movie. We only got a tiny bit of him in the first one, maybe like an interview on TV or something. We get a lot more of him. And how I feel about him in this movie is sort of complicated, because at first he seems a little weird, and he's kind of like stalking Sydney to get her to go on the show and making her feel bad about putting him in prison, which I can understand that because he was an innocent guy, but he's like almost like assaulting her and like backing her against the wall. It's like, dude, what the hell are you doing? You're not helping your case here. And it starts to make us think, maybe he's actually not a good guy. Maybe he's the killer in this one or something. And there's a moment where he's got blood on his fingers where we think it is him. Oh, speaking of that, so he got blood on his fingers because he was trying to help Dewey. How in the actual fuck did Dewey survive that? That was ridiculous. And I honestly think they probably should have killed off Dewey in that moment. I think that would have made sense. It would have been good, but of course they got to keep him alive because Dewey is unkillable. He's basically Michael Myers. Gale is also unkillable, and Cotton calls it out in the movie. He's like, Gale, you got more lives than a cat. It's like, they're calling it out, but that doesn't make it any less ridiculous, especially in Dewey's case. Like, how many times did he get stabbed by Ghostface? Like, how does he not die there? Surviving the first movie, getting stabbed in the back, I understand, but surviving the shit that he does in this one was a little bit too far for me. So it's another thing that bugged me. Cotton Weary's plot line, he ends up actually being very heroic in the end. They tease you a little bit. You know what? I might as well get into the killer reveals in the ending. So we find out that Mickey's the killer. He kills Derek, and he tries to trick Sidney for a minute. He's like, Derek's actually my partner, which is another very intense scene because we're not sure either. It's like, wait a minute. Is Derek actually his partner? But Derek's like, no, he's lying. It's not me. But we're not sure because we're still about the thing earlier in the movie where he got slashed in the arm, but not killed. We're still a little suspicious of him, and so is Sidney. And then Mickey just shoots him, and he says, "Oh, your trust issues got this guy killed." I'm like, oh man, so well done because we're really not sure. And then for a while, we don't know who his partner is, or does he even have one. He goes on about how, he's going to blame the movies and they're not going to prosecute him. Which, even when you're hearing that, you're like, oh, come on, dude. Seriously, you killed all these people and you think that's going to work? Like, this kid's totally out of his mind, and they call that out too. And then you find out that his partner, the other killer, is this lady who had been in the movie a couple times, and I feel like this was a little cheap because we barely knew her. I mean, she was basically she was stalking Gale, and she keeps trying to interview her and stuff, and basically trying to be like the new Gale, which she annoyed me throughout the entire movie. And then we find out that she's the killer. It's like, okay, and we find out that she's actually Billy Loomis's mom. It's like, okay, how did nobody notice that Billy Loomis's mom was walking around interviewing people? And they say that, she lost a bunch of weight because Gale's like, I've seen pictures of you. She lost a bunch of weight and got a haircut or a makeover or something. But Sidney recognized her. So the fact that nobody saw Debbie Salt running around being a news person interviewing people seems a bit of a stretch to me. And the fact that we barely saw her in the movie, all she was this annoying character with no characterization whatsoever. She ends up being Billy Loomis's mom and the main killer. A little bit underwhelming, especially compared to the first one. Billy Loomis, much, much better. So I liked Mickey, didn't like Debbie Salt as much, and then the whole final confrontation with her does go on a little bit too long. Cotton comes in, and he's like, we're not sure if he's actually going to kill her or not, because Debbie Salt makes an offer. He's like, let me kill Sidney and all your problems will go away. And it almost looks for a second like he's going to. Like, oh shit. Is Cotton, what? Because throughout the rest of the movie, we're not really sure where exactly his morals and ethics are. He doesn't seem like a super great person, because he gets Sidney and he tries to get her on Diane Sawyer. Basically, all he cares about is the fame and the money. And then looks like he's thinking, and then Sidney says she'll go on Diane Sawyer with him, and then he shoots Debbie Salt. So that still doesn't necessarily make him a great guy, because was he really not gonna save Sidney if the Diane Sawyer wasn't on the table? So that was a little bit strange, and certainly by the end he does kind of seem like a good guy, and Sidney's like, go talk to Cotton, he's the hero. But even then, he wants them to pay him for it and gives them his card. And then throughout the rest of the movie, again, I talk about how he was basically stalking Sidney and acting really weird. So what they did with him in this movie, I wasn't exactly in love with. And I know they're trying to trick us into thinking that he's the killer, even though that wouldn't really make any sense, because she blamed him for the death of her mom, and then he gets off finally, and now he goes and kills people. I don't think anyone ever bought that. So why are you trying to do this with him and make us hate him? Very strange. And then they try to make us like him by the end, which I don't completely buy into either. The Cotton Weary thing was a little bit weird, but Liev Schreiber's a great actor, and I enjoyed seeing him in the movie. Seeing much more of him in this movie than the first one was definitely enjoyable, just because he's a good screen presence. So, again, this didn't end up being nearly as long as the first one. I think I touched on pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. There isn't nearly as many specific things that I wanted to get in depth about and rave about like I did with the first one. I enjoy this movie. It's a solid Scream movie. It's certainly not the worst one, which we'll talk about soon. but it's not nearly as good as the first one because it doesn't feel as fresh or original. The killer reveals are underwhelming compared to the first one, at least one of them. And then the pacing is off a little bit. It doesn't feel as tight as the first one does. But on the other hand, we still get all the great returning cast. We get great characterization for our main characters. We get the continuing story of Dewey and Gale. We get the Derek stuff. We get the Mickey stuff. We certainly get some cool kills, some really intense, memorable scenes. So I definitely recommend this movie, and I think it's enjoyable. But after seeing the first one, I would temper your expectations a little bit and just realize that nothing's ever going to touch that. And this is kind of more on the level of a typical slasher movie, but it's not bad at all. Scream 2, I'm going to give a 6.5 out of 10. So guys, what do you think about Scream 2? Do you like it? Do you think it's as good as the first one? Do you think it's quite of a step off like I did, but do you think it's still a decent movie? Or do you think it's just totally bad, which I've heard some people say as well? Most people, I think, tend to fall in line with me, which is we think it's not as good as the first one, but still a solid, good Scream movie and very enjoyable. But guys, subscribe if you enjoy my content. I got some stuff coming. I got to do my Scream 3 review, Scream 4 review, Scream 5 review, and then I'm going to do a ranking of the whole franchise. Then after that, I should have some openings. So I think I have some cool stuff coming, which I've been teasing for a while. I don't want to say that is what it is, but I'm thinking probably gaming related, some stuff game related, maybe some stuff TV related. Going to branch out a little bit. So that's a small tease as to what it's going to be. I won't get into specifics. Okay, one more thing. I'll talk about some classic games, some retro games from my childhood and some from like my high school years. So that's all you're going to get for now, but trust me, it's going to be cool. I've been planning this stuff for a long time. Subscribe if you enjoy my content, hit the notification bell to get notified when I post a video. If you enjoy this video specifically, hit the like button. Likes are extremely important for YouTube channels. They help so much. So please, if you like this video, hit the like button. Drop a comment if you've seen Scream 2 and what do you think of it, how it compares to the first one. And my next video will be Scream 3. So stay tuned for that. See you guys soon.